Hello and welcome back to the series about learning Java. And today we're talking about some testing protocols. We start with a method that I bet you're glad to see by now, the actual way to print things to the console. I'm going to start. There's two different methods for doing this. Both of them start with system.out. This is an object for some reason. Java automatically creates it for us. It is an object that allows us to interact with the console. There's also system.in, which you can use to take inputs, but I'm not going to cover that here. The method is called print, so I'll print a string like here's a sentence, semicolon, and a line. If I were to run this right now, it would just print that. That's all you would see. You might also see some details about like when you ran it, but the actual text of what's going to be output at the console is just that. Now I'm going to print another sentence, but this time I'm going to use something called println. Does something a little bit different. We're about to see what it does. Here's a hint to what it does. I'm going to use my editors for running the program, which will take us a few seconds. We'll see. Here's a sentence with a spacing cleared. There's no space in between them. Print prints text and then ends. Doesn't do anything beyond that. Print line prints the text you tell it to print and then adds a line break. So if I were to print something again after this, it would appear on a new line. Usually that's what you're looking for, because otherwise everything runs together and you have no idea what got printed in which command. It's really helpful to use print line, unless you're trying to, especially if you're trying to intentionally print line breaks. But if you're not, and you just want each individual thing you print to show up on one line, you want to use this one. I want to say there's a third command for printing, but I don't remember what it is, if there is one. So these are the only two I've ever used. This is print and don't put a line break after it. This is print and do put a line break after it. Now, here's another thing we can do. We're going to create a new integer array called numbers. I'm not going to put anything in it right now. I'm just going to find a new int array with 4 elements. I'm going to use something called a try catch block. In a try catch block, the compiler, which is the program that figures out what your code is saying and then runs it, will look at the code you put inside the try block. So let's say for right now, I want to print, I'm going back to this one because I don't want to have to run the program every time. Print the 4th element of numbers. It will try to run that command, and if it can't run it, it'll instead run whatever's in the catch. Try doesn't even have arguments. It doesn't have parentheses. Catch always takes exactly one argument. It's an exception. Exception is a default class in Java that encompasses all kinds of things that will throw errors when you try to run it. The default thing to call it is EX. You can call it whatever you want. The editor doesn't care. It's going to put in the exception that happened when you tried to run the try block. When you run the try block, it'll hit the first thing that calls. It'll run the entire code if there's no errors in it. The first time it hits an error, it'll jump to the catch block and throw that error. If there are multiple errors, it won't find the later ones. In this catch block, I'm going to print the output. Array is too small. And then this thing called x.print_trace. So the issue here, in case you haven't seen it yet, is that the integer array has 4 elements. Remember that their indexes for arrays start at 0. So we have it numbers 0, numbers 1, numbers 2, and numbers 3. That's the end of the array. Numbers 4 isn't defined. We don't have a 4th index in this array. It goes from 0 to 3. So when I try to run this, it'll say you don't have an array, that this array doesn't have a 4th index. I told it to print array is too small. So this will just print exactly what I said here. But then this will print a few things. First, it'll print java.lang.array out of bounds. No, this is not what it's called. I always mess this up. Array index out of bounds exception. This is a class. Array index out of bounds exception. I'll show you how that works in a second. I'll give you some text, which is, I think it says index 4 out of range for length 4. There's what it means is that there's no fourth index in an array with 4 elements. You can only go up to 3. So I just put a dot to summarize that. And then it has another line that says at. So for this example, testing.main, this means, we've seen this a couple of times when I hover over the errors in the other videos, the class lTesting method main. You might also notice that the method main, while I'm talking about it, has string array args that we haven't seen in other videos. This is because I actually want to run this. When I do it in the other videos, I'm not actually running it. I'm just demonstrating this is the main method, which would be running if it was the method I was trying to run. Here, I need it to actually run, and Java makes you put this as an argument for it for some reason. But that is what my code editor recognizes as something that can be run. And then it tells me lTesting.java. It's not 8. It is 8. And this says we're in a class lTesting main. I think this might be wrong. And then file lTesting is a Java file. lTesting.java, line 8. Don't know why it says exactly like this, but this is what it says. It tells you class and method, if it's in a method, and then file name, line number. Line 8, this is where it found the error. The other way I can write this is throw new array index out of bounds exception, semicolon. This does basically the same thing. It'll say java.lang.array index out of bounds exception, and then it has no text because I didn't tell it to put any text. And then at lTesting.main, lTesting.java, line 10. This error is no longer being used. x.print stat trace took this error, which told it what line it was on, and printed that out. Now I'm throwing a new exception, so it's going to see it that I threw it on line 10. And that's the line it tells me. It doesn't tell me where the error actually came from, because I'm not using this error. I'm using an error that I just made up. Java calls errors exceptions. I keep saying error. They're officially exceptions, but that doesn't mean anything to me. They're errors in your code. It happens when you have an error. Exception is just a technical term. I can also put inside these parentheses whatever text I want. So numbers and index 4. Maybe this will tell me that I'm talking about the numbers array and what the error actually was. This will show up after the semicolon. So in the first one, when I did it with x.print, I keep saying that wrong, x.print stack trace, it said java.lang.array index out of bounds exception, index 4, not valid for length 4, whatever it says. I don't remember what it says off the top of my head. Now, instead of that string that I don't remember, it says this, the text I tell it to throw. And there's one more part of my hex block, which is called finally. Personally, I do not really like this. I don't see a very important use to it, but it is a thing you can do. I'm going to set numbers of 0 equal to 1. All that finally does is it says whether we ran the try block or ran the catch block, we want to run the finally block. It turns out that if you put code after the finally block, like for example print numbers of 0, that'll also run. So there's really no reason to put anything in here, because it'll run this and then it'll run that no matter what happened up here. You might as well just put all of it outside the finally block. There is a lot more that you can do to test code, but this is a lot of the stuff you need to know, and basically everything I've ever used. You can handle most of the problems in your code with lines like this. Figure out what's wrong by printing stuff, try certain things, and catch errors if there are errors. This is more like development part, because if you have an error, that like when your code is really running, you want to make sure that it's not going to break your entire system, but that you can handle it appropriately. That's all for this video. I'll see you next time.